Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Deborah Niblick, and I'm the Senior Librarian at the Monterey Park Bruggemeyer Library. And I am so excited to introduce Tori Eldridge. She is the author of the Amazing Ninja Daughter series, and she came today to talk a little bit about the second book in her series, which is called The Ninja's Blade. Hi, Tori. How are you?
Hey, Deborah, I'm doing great, thanks.
Fantastic. So, for those of us who haven't read your book, can you give us a little brief summary or a recap of what happened in the first book?
Oh, absolutely. So let me see, I probably even have it right here. So this is the Lily Wong series. So it's all about Lily Wong. And she is a 25-year-old Chinese Norwegian modern day ninja in Los Angeles with Joy Luck Club family issues. So that's kind of her in a nutshell, you know? And the first book was this fun little yellow one right here, The Ninja Daughter. And in that book, Lily ends up fighting, oh my gosh, the Ukrainian mob and sex traffickers and this incredibly dark and mysterious assassin guy, and even her own parents, her own family, to save the lives of these two women and this innocent child. So everything is complicated with Lily because she's 25 now, but back when she was first year in UCLA, this is kind of a little backstory you get in The Ninja Daughter, her younger sister was raped and murdered. So that totally derailed Lily's life and, really impacted her family. And at that point, Lily just went, I can't live my own life. I've got to go out there. And she becomes a protector and rescuer of women and children, a big sister to a city, if you will. So she's driven, she's devoted, she's studied wushu her entire life since she was a little bitty. And she studied ninjutsu on the sly with this Japanese sensei in the park and kept it hidden from her Hong Kong immigrant mother because she knew that wasn't going to go over well. And so she's got all these secrets, right? So when she drops out of UCLA, she goes all in on this. And now she lives above her North Dakota Norwegian father's Chinese restaurant. So you have to kind of wrap your brain around that one. So she's a really uncommon hero. Usually, you get these, real hero protectors. They're estranged from their family. They're out there doing vigilantism. They're, John Wick, revenging their dog and their wife and whatever. But Lily is in the heart of dealing with her family in the middle of all of this stuff, So, this is a huge part of these books. So what they do is they integrate fast-paced action, complex mystery, and really deep family dynamics. And that's kind of, the nature of all these books. So The Ninja Daughter was loads of fun. She got into a whole lot of trouble. You get to meet her amazing family. You get to meet Sensei and all these people she works for. And this assassin named Tran, oh my gosh. But the end of it is really exciting and has a fair amount of violence. So the second book picks up 3 weeks after the first book. So the second book is The Ninja's Blade. And The Ninja's Blade starts out with Lily really kind of dealing with the effects of the end of the first book. I have this feeling about violence in entertainment where, all of this stuff is done, especially by heroes, and it's like, no big deal. Well, it is a big deal. Whether it's done to you, by you, around you, it has an effect, and it should have an effect, and it should be noticed. And so Lily is dealing with some, some serious PTSD type things, even though she won't admit it. And so that's going on. There's other things that are causing her to doubt. She's getting called out. There's a lot of racial undertones in this one where she's having to examine herself. That's something that's really timely right now because, I really want to encourage all of us to check in with ourselves and how are we looking at things, So Lily is having cause to do with that. But The Ninja's Blade takes a deep dive into the commercial sexual exploitation of youth. So, wow, it's a big, heavy, gritty topic, but at the same time, her adorably meddlesome grandparents are coming in from Hong Kong to celebrate her mother's 50th birthday and just causing incredible angst in her family. And there's this guy. So yeah, there's all that going on while she's hunting down this missing teenager, trying to rescue this prostituted teen, hunting down a sociopathic trafficker. Oh, and members of a Mexican gang are hunting for her. So yeah, a lot going on.
My head's just spinning from all of the issues that are going. Can you tell us how you keep track of all that, and how do you weave all of, so you have some serious themes that are going on in this one. It definitely sounds more like an introspection, I guess, of the main character, and then you have all of this noise, all this cacophony of things happening in the background. How do you keep track of that without, getting lost?
Yeah, it's a great question. And yeah, I mean, my main goals with these books, is to blend all of these things in a fast-paced novel. You don't usually get deep family dynamics in an action-packed thriller. You don't usually get a complex mystery, when you're dealing with, romance and some of these things. So, but I wanted it all. So I used to be a screenwriter way back in the day. And so when I write novels, I use that technique. And what I do is I set it up in 4 acts, the second and third act being the big middle, because the middle is twice as big as the beginning or the end. And so what that does for me is it allows me to have a beginning, kind of a twisty middle, and a climactic end to each of the 4 acts. And that keeps that pace going. It keeps the excitement going, keeps the pace going, keeps the, everything happening in there. And then what I do is I have all of these different arcs, different subplots that, as you say, I have to keep track of. So after I have it in acts, I populate it with chapters, and I create kind of chapter by chapter summaries, so I know the important points of what's going on, who's in there. And then I color code it. I used to do this as a screenwriter too. I'd use different colored 3x5 cards. Now there's this handy dandy digital platform called Scrivener, and they have a binder, and I can color label them. So I can tell, oh, wow, I've got a bunch of action too close together. I need to spread that out. Or I haven't seen, Lily's mother in a while. Or, oh, I haven't seen where did that love interest go? Or, oh, I've left her grandparents in the dust. Or what happened to that teenager? And where did, blah, 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 right? And so when I color code them, I can just see at a glance where the gaps are. And it's like, oh, I need to make sure that, I check in with where's Emma Hughes, or I check in with what's going on with Dalla and Ana Lucia, at Jefferson High School, or I check in, what's going on with Josie on Hollywood Boulevard, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
That's really neat, because we're probably going to have a lot of folks that are going to be viewing this video wondering, well, I kind of want to write something like that, so where should I start? So a lot of folks, unfortunately, don't necessarily have all the guidance they need to go ahead and kick off their first novel. And I think it's really important that you mentioned that you have to kind of think of the bigger picture first from the overall picture before you start moving into the details.
Well, I would qualify that with, that's how I do it. Now, I know some incredible writer friends. Oh, Hank Felipe Ryan, huge author, right? Big best-selling author. She doesn't know where she's going. She just starts writing. I'm like, woman, you're scaring me to death. I like to know. I start with, usually I start with research. Like with The Ninja's Blade, I knew I wanted to do a deep dive into the commercial sexual exploitation of youth, specifically in Los Angeles. This is a huge issue. Lily, as I said, is a protector, rescuer of women and children. And this is a big issue and a great risk that our children our kids, our teenagers, all of our teenagers, no matter what neighborhood or socioeconomic, environment, all of them are at risk. And so I personally start with research, and this took a couple months. And oh my gosh, the research, wow, right? And from all these interviews, articles, news reports, blah, 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 I started to see all these myriad ways in which our teenagers are lured, tricked, coerced, forced, kidnapped into this horrible situation, and all the methods, the insidious methods that these traffickers are using to control them. And by the way, I say traffickers instead of pimps because we are talking about prostituted teens. And I say prostituted teens instead of child prostitutes, because if you are below the age of consent, this is a crime that's being done to you. Right? You did not choose it. It's being done to you. So all of these things are part of what I'm exploring. And so anyway, out of the research came all these characters. Oh my gosh, these wonderful teenagers who just appeared with these full lives and all these different ways that things are getting, happen. And some of them are tragic and poignant, and some of them are their personalities are amusing or tough and all these things, and they come through. And then of course there are all the people, the dangerous people surrounding them. All these characters appear, and then the plot comes. Then I come out with a little germ, a premise, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then turns into that other thing. So that's my process. Now that doesn't mean it has to be anybody else's. A lot of people just get like one little gem of an idea or a character, and they just start writing. And they see where it goes.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I was going to ask, do we have any new characters? And clearly you just said that we have a whole slew of young teens, which I'm really excited about. And my question is, these teens, do they have various backgrounds? Are they all from one particular area? Like, how do they meet each other, other than being obviously kidnapped and
Yeah. Well, I can't tell you how they meet each other or if they meet each other, but I can give you an idea of who they are. Because I don't want to kind of give away too much. The first one you meet is Emma Hughes, and she's a prep school gal from Bel Air, red hair, pale skin, rich family. How'd that happen, right? And Lily meets her in the women's shelter. Lily works for a women's shelter run by this wonderful Black woman from Compton and her New York Jewish husband, former stockbroker from New York. And they have this wonderful women's shelter in Culver City. And that's who Lily works with. So that's where she meets Emma. And then Emma gets abducted. So the quest begins with, she has to find Emma. Now, as she's finding Emma, she runs into other things, other problems. And one of the problems that she runs into happen to be two other teenagers. One is Dala, who is this striking Black teenager, former high school student from Jefferson High. And she meets Dala. She sees her at this taqueria with this young Guatemalan, kind of sweet, innocent, awkward teenager. And these two girls do not fit. There's like this big, there's a power imbalance between them. There's a maturity imbalance between them. And so when Lily spots the older girl, spots spots Dala convincing Ana Lucia to get into this hot muscle car with this, suave, guy who's way too young, way too old to be hanging out with these teenagers. Lily's like, what? And so, she's hunting for Emma, but, now she's like, what's going on with these girls? And then her grandparents come in, and then her mom's freaking out. And then Daniel is calling, to follow up on the next date that happened in The Ninja Daughter. And then this all leads her to this amazing nonprofit organization. And that leads her to yet another teen in Hollywood Boulevard. So yeah, there's like all of these, it's a very multicultural story. and a lot of I was going to say a lot of fun. That sounds really kind of weird because it's got some really deep, it's one of those books that it might make you cry. It's guaranteed to make you laugh, and it will most definitely make you hungry. So I don't know what to tell you about that.
As a native Southern Californian, it just brings me so much joy to read stories where I actually recognize cities, I recognize restaurants, I recognize streets, because Los Angeles itself it's huge. Los Angeles County is huge, and it's such a melting pot of so many ethnicities, so many languages, so many religions, that it's the perfect playground, if you ask me, to set any kind of any story, because you've got so much happening where, more like the Bel Air, you have the ultra rich, but when you go to like Watts, you have, poverty. But if you go to like East LA, you get to see, the Latin experience. And then when you go to Roland Heights and Monterey Park, for example, we have a large Asian population. So it's, that's what I love so much about these types of stories, because it really gives an amazing, like, this beautiful painting for those who have no idea what Los Angeles is about. Because
it's really true. It's really true. Los Angeles is like a character in this book. I think of Los Angeles as a macrocosm of Lily, because, Lily is Chinese and Norwegian, and she's also highly influenced by her ninja sensei, who is from Japan. Mm-hmm. So she has these three cultures that are, really inform who she is in a city that, as you say, is one of the most diverse cities in the world. So Lily grew up in Arcadia, very much like Monterey Park. By the way, Daniel works in Monterey Park, which is a fun thing. The Ninja Daughter, a lot of it takes place in Cerritos. The Ninja's Blade, quite a bit of it takes place on The Blade, which is Long Beach Boulevard section in Compton. And then, it takes you everywhere from the valley to the airport to, all over the place, even Little Armenia. Yeah. So yeah, it's everywhere.
And going back to, we were talking a little bit about this story being more introspection for Lily, and, because obviously she's always been grappling with her identity. And especially here in California, or just in the country in general, anybody who happens to be mixed, we're constantly, because I'm also mixed, we're constantly struggling with that. And I think it's, when you see it in a character, it's such a, not, how do I put it? It just makes you feel like I'm not the only one who's going through this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm very fortunate. I'm Hawaiian, Chinese, Norwegian. So my father is actually Norwegian from North Dakota, like Lily. My mother is mostly Chinese. She was Chinese Hawaiian from Maui. So my relatives come from Canton, but Lily's Chinese side comes from Hong Kong. So we have this mixed race experience together. However, I was born and raised in Honolulu. Now in Honolulu, that is a wonderful place to grow up as mixed race, because to begin with, most of us are. It's what you want to be. It helps you to be part of all the various communities. And so it's a real plus. So I really wanted, it's very important to me to show this kind of love of heritage. So rather than being at odds with her heritage, she values and embraces and is informed equally from her father's heritage and her mother's, and it makes her who she is. So rather than being a source of angst, it's almost a source of empowerment. That said, there may come a time in future books where that is put to the test. We will see. In this book, though, what I really wanted to do was, as I mentioned, we're at a time where racial issues is huge, especially in our country. And I think it's always important for all of us as individuals to keep checking in with ourselves, how we're viewing things, if we picked up any biases, if we picked up any assumptions, the way we thought back then may not be the way we're thinking now, or the way we want to think in the future. And, we got to check in with these things. And so I figured, what better way to invite people to perhaps do this than with a biracial champion of justice, right? In a diverse city, who's getting called out for racism and going, wait a minute, did I am I profiling, and she really has to do some very deep questions because, she has some things that happened to her in the Ninja Daughter before that are affecting her judgment, shall we say. And the other thing that's very, very cool, I think, about the Ninja's Blade is people keep changing. Yeah. And Lily's opinion of people keeps changing. And I'm hoping that readers' opinions of people in this book will keep changing, and perhaps even readers' opinions of Lily will keep changing. And that's cool because I like that conversation.
No, I absolutely love it, because I think with all characters, if they quit evolving, then it's almost kind of like what the point sometimes. It's just like they're never going to change. How am I, I think it's important that we do see that, as even with fiction or, whatever it is that we're reading, if there's no kind of evolution, then it's just like, what do we have to look forward to? And speaking of changes, it's kind of loosely related to changes, but what was the hardest scene for you to write? And can you also give us an example of a scene that you love so much, but you had to cut?
But I had to cut. Oh, did I have to cut anything in this one? I'm trying to think if I had to cut anything in this one. I don't think I had to actually cut a scene. Usually if my editor, says, you don't need this, she's right. And I'm usually not in love with it, so I don't think there's anything that I really love that I had to cut. But there is a scene that I really love in it, and it has to do with Lily's family. And so she's in Arcadia, and she's sitting down at a mahjong table with her mother and her grandparents. And in the course of playing this mahjong game, there is a whole other thing going on in this conversation. And so it's like fast-paced mahjong and these other things, and they're, arguing about the protests that are happening in Hong Kong, the 2019 protests that are happening in Hong Kong, and the attitudes, and her mother's angst with business, because, by the way, her mother is the director of Lily's grandfather's Hong Kong International Finance Company. So her mother is a high-powered, finance person. But, there's a little bit of this going on because her father won't retire. So, there's that going on. It's all happening in a mahjong game. And that's really fun. I like that one. So there's kind of a scene like that in The Ninja Daughter that I really like, on that same lines, where Lily is in the kitchen with her mother and they're talking about real estate. And it's to get information that furthers this really complex mystery and trying to get to the bottom of it. But there's a whole other thing going on between Lily and her mother that's hugely important. So I really like scenes that operate on multiple levels at the same time, especially ones where there's a lot of action going, but also this other thing. So that's super fun. So
yeah, you got a lot going on.
I didn't name the thing that was the hardest to write, though, did I? I totally forgot about that. Okay, so there are some real, there's some heavy things in here, especially when Lily is dealing with some of these traffickers and some of these teens. And they can be very emotional, but they weren't hard to write because they were messing me up emotionally. They were difficult, challenging to write because it was so important to me to get them correct. So authenticity is like key for all the Lily Wong novels. Authenticity in the ninja arts. I hold a 5th degree black belt in Toshindo Ninjutsu. There's actually a martial art for the ninja, and I've been training it a long time. So it is very important to me to portray the ninja in an authentic, modern way. It's important to me to have cultural authenticity, to have authenticity in Los Angeles, so that the real things, but also now with the Ninja's Blade to really, do justice to this issue and also to do justice to all of the different cultural communities and characters that are in this book. And so any of the chapters that were really dealing with that, you know, that it took a lot. It took a lot.
And that's a perfect segue into our next set of questions I have about you as an author. So when you are tackling these difficult issues and themes in your book, do you have any advice for self-care for any of the authors?
What a great question. Yeah, self-care is important. You know what? I start the day, I open my eyes, and the first thing I think about is, oh, good, a new day. You know, that number one, that's how I greet it, right? The second thing I do before I even step my feet out of the bed is I perch my pillows against the backrest. I sit up nice and tall and I meditate. I meditate every single morning. I have been a lifelong meditator. I started this when I was 12. I've never stopped. My ways of doing it have changed over the years. And of course, when I started training in ninjutsu, we have a certain way of doing that as well. And now I've just decided that this is the way I can guarantee I never miss a day, is if I meditate before I even get out of bed. So that's number one. And in the course of doing that, I set my intention for the day. And it might be just a small intention, or it could be a big one. It could be specific or general, but it really helps. It really helps because it gives me a purpose and it puts me in the right frame of mind. The other thing that I do is I have a routine, and that's made it really much easier to deal with this pandemic life. I have a routine and I stick with it. I'm pretty much doing the same routine that I did before. And it always involves, I mean, I work all day basically, but I do my creative work when it is most in tune with me, my energy. So I am most creative in the morning. So I start writing on my novels. Right now I'm writing the third Lily Wong book. So I start writing creatively in the morning. And if I have to do business or promotion or maybe answer interview questions or write an article, I try and save that for the afternoon because that's a different energy and I can fall into that more easily than I can creativity. And then in the late afternoon, I do some kind of physical exercise. It could be as mild as 10 minutes of online yoga. It could be extreme, like, you know, an hour and a half hiking in the mountains or exercise bike or cross training or whatever. But I try and do something every single day, you know, and then once it hits time for me to fix dinner, then it's family time. You know, it's me, my husband, my adult son, we're chilling out, you know, and yeah, that's how I take care of myself.
And it's really refreshing to know because even as writers, you know, you're human. So there is a point where you're going to have to stop and take a break.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting question that I would love, if you have an answer, it'd be great, is how do you balance making demands on the reader with taking care of the reader?
Oh, now by making demands on the reader, what do you mean exactly?
Making demands as like, okay, here comes those two, really that action, and then we have the action, then we have the tough issues, and you know, it's just almost like how do we process all of this at the same time, but without to the point where you don't want your reader to close the book and throw it across the room because they're so upset or frightened.
Yeah, no, that'd be bad. The books are so pretty. Don't throw them. Yeah, that's a really great question. I really want readers to be able to trust me. And when I'm reading somebody's book, I want to be able to trust an author. There have been books that I've read where I have not trusted the author. I have not trusted them that they will take me to a place where I want to go or I'm willing to go, or that they will follow through. And to a satisfying ending. It doesn't have to be a happy ending, a satisfying ending. And so I've had that experience as a reader, and I really want to avoid that as a writer. It is very important to me that readers can trust me that I will care for them. And I do care for them. There are some, I avoid anything salacious, gratuitous. I avoid manipulating emotions for the sake of just, eliciting, some sort of a thing. It's, I'm not interested in that. So I'm not going to. And if I take you through something where Lily is in real danger and you're very concerned for her well-being, I've set it up where perhaps that's in the past and she's relaying that. So, however horrible that was, you're talking with her right now. Yeah, she made it through. She made it through okay. And that's one way of being able to trust. The other is by approaching anything with compassion. Lily is, as a character, a very empathetic, compassionate character. She may have an initial impression of somebody, but the more she learns about them, the deeper her empathy becomes, and the more she allows herself to change her opinion of that person. And so you're going to find in the Ninja's Blade that you start to see many sides of many characters. These supporting characters are all really, really important. And a lot of them are teens and from a lot of cultural backgrounds. And the more you get to know them, the more you start to go, well, I never thought of, and you start to look at them and their situation and their choices and their predicament in very different ways. And so Lily has some dramatic changes in this. And so I think it's a combination of, earning that trust and approaching this kind of work with compassion and sprinkling in a fair amount of humor.
I think that's some sage advice, especially for those who that are, just starting out as writers, but also for those who are aspiring to be writers. So the next question is what advice do you have for new writers?
Oh gosh, first and foremost, write. You got to write, and it almost doesn't even matter what you write. It can be a journal. It can be a short story. The Ninja Daughter came from me answering a challenge. Could I write a thriller in 200 words? And I thought, I don't know. Can I? So I did. And it ended up being the premise for a short story that ended up being a pivotal scene in The Ninja Daughter. So that's what I mean. It almost doesn't matter what you write. So many of my novels, so we have The Ninja Daughter and The Ninja's Blade. They're both published. I have another two other novels completed in completely different possible series being shopped. I have a sequel to one of those halfway, completely outlined and a third of the way written. And I'm writing the third Lily Wong novel now. So I've written enough to kind of have, a process and a way of things. And I can tell you that most of these books came from shorter works. The Ninja Daughter, like I said, came from all those things. One of them that I wrote, a novel, came from a screenplay that I wrote decades ago. A couple of the other ones came from short stories that I've written for different anthologies. So you never know what's going to lead you to a novel. And maybe long form isn't even your thing. Maybe short form is, maybe a 4,000 word short story is where you live, or a novella length is where you live. Or I even have a really quirky narrative poem in the reboot of Weird Tales magazine. You can see it over my shoulder, that green one. Yeah, it's really quirky. Where the heck did that come from? It's a horror thing, and just really, it's really quirky. So you just never know. So experiment, write, find out where you live, and while you're doing this, enjoy the process. Try not to worry about where it's going to go, or if it'll be successful, or if it'll be published. Let that take care of itself. Do the work. Enjoy the process, and let that be your reward, and let everything else be icing on the cake.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Tori, and thank you so much for coming today to talk to me. And I'm really looking forward to the second book, and I wish you so much luck with this release. I know it's difficult with COVID right now, but I wanted to let our viewers know that we do own both books here at the Monterey Park Bruggemeyer Library. We even have the ebook version available through the library's OverDrive collection. So if you don't have a library card, please visit our website at montereypark.ca.gov/library to get your own digital library card so you can check out Tori's novel if you prefer it in the ebook form, or give us a call at the library and we could actually pull it for you and you can take it home to read.
Oh
So
my gosh,
again,
that is so cool. And if you guys want, like, you know, extra goodies, go to my website, torieldridge.com, TORIELDRIDGE.com. There's a book club page, and the book club page has videos of me doing ninjutsu, you know, action demos. It has recipes for all sorts of fun stuff, tea recommendations, self-defense tips, and these super cool book club kits that have interviews and discussion questions and even dream casting for Lily's family. So it's really fun, and it kind of enhances the whole reading experience.
So, all right, everyone, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Tori, and definitely check, this video will be available on the City of Monterey Park's YouTube channel. So just log on to our website and I'll also actually post that there as well. And have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining me and Tori.